Autodesk. Uh, like I said, I'm going to show you a couple tips and tricks and some things you might want to use, even if this is not the part of the project that you're going to work on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pull in an image. I'm going to try to do something Rome High themed. I'm going to trace that image. I'm going to use that to help make a little 3D printable puzzle design. So please make sure you are working in Foundations of Engineering. Make sure you're working in your student work folder. You can find the demo stuff that I go through here in the Design Assets folder. And I think what I'm going to ask you guys to name this folder, like we've done our Intro to CAD stuff, create a new folder for this 3D printing project so you guys can save all those design files in an easy to find place. Let me move this around real quick. All right. Let me get rid of this project we were working on in my third level engineering. All right, there I've got a blank space to work with. What I'd like to do is maybe take the Rome High logo, the Rome City Schools logo, and turn that into a little puzzle. So let's start there. It's really easy to take in external images and import that into Autodesk Fusion, and you can use that as a reference in your designs. Like I said, pretty easily. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Let me go ahead and download that little wolf image. It's going to save an image file. That's something I'm going to use to help create, like I said, help create my puzzle design. You could insert images. You can insert drawing files. You can actually insert other 3D models from different projects using this little insert menu over at the right side of the screen while you have the 3D solid modeling tools open. So I'm going to insert an image using what's called a canvas. So if you click that canvas button, should give you an option to insert stuff from your computer. Like I said, you can pull in images, blueprints, you can pull in other models and all kinds of stuff to help you create your design. I'm going to grab this little picture of the Rome High wolf that I downloaded. Let me stick that on the top plane. Let's see. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. So I'm going to play around with these scale tools just to make that the size that I want. There we go. That's probably reasonable. All right. So again, with that tool, now I've got a picture of the Rome High wolf. Again, what I want to do is turn this into a puzzle I could 3D print. You probably know what a puzzle is. You got pieces that fit together, maybe in some interesting and clever way. Maybe like a traditional puzzle where you have the pieces that interlock. You can do something pretty simple. What I want to do is trace this wolf head so I can use this as sort of the outline for my puzzle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sketch. I'm going to create a sketch of that same top plane. Let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. And now that I have a sketch open, I've got access to those 2D drawing tools. I'm going to play around with these 2D drawing tools and try to trace this little wolf head. And I'm going to do half of it because it is obviously symmetric, so I can reflect the other half onto the other side and hopefully have a completed profile. So let me actually start with a center line. I'm going to select that line tool. Where it says line type over on the sketch palette, I'm going to select construction line and just kind of eyeballing this as best as I can. Let me drop a center line down the middle of Mr. Willie the Wolf. Now, there are drawing tools out there that will trace drawings like this for you. But for our purposes, if we're doing this strictly in Autodesk Fusion, you might, if you're tracing an existing raster image like this image that I downloaded here, you might have to use some of these drawing tools to trace things manually. So yeah, this little piece right here looks kind of like an arc to me. Oop, let me turn my construction tool off. So I'm going to draw an arc. Let me grab the line tool, make a little line going down here. These look like just the lines, so easy enough to draw those. Looks like I need another arc. Great practice if you're still struggling with using some of these drawing tools, but maybe a tad bit tedious if you got this stuff down. But yeah, not too bad. So again, I'm not going to get it absolutely perfect. I'm just trying to get something close enough that I can use for my puzzle design. And again, all I'm looking for this puzzle design is the outside profile, so I'm not going to worry about all the details inside. Now, if I were doing this kind of thing professionally, I'd use some type of vector drawing software. If you've ever taken like graphic design or played around with software like Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape, those are all tools that make doing this kind of thing a whole lot easier. Hopefully I've got all those things connected. All right. Let me then go back into, I closed my sketch. Let me open my original sketch back up. Again, I don't want to have to go through that same process for the other side, so I'm going to grab this mirror tool, select all the pieces that I want to reflect, making sure I grab everything and don't have any holes. There we go. Let me click where it says mirror line. I'm going to grab that construction line that I dropped down the middle. Click OK, and I've got a copy of this profile around this image. So this saves an image in your browser. You can access that. It'll create a little entry that says canvases, and that'll be the images that have been added to your design. I'm going to hide that just for the time being. And use that sketch profile that I just traced to make this three-dimensional. So let me grab that sketch profile. I'm going to grab my extrude tool. Let's make that a 1/4 inch, so 0.25 inches. All right, so not super interesting quite yet. That's just an outline of the wolf that I've extruded to add some depth. We still want to turn this into something that looks like a puzzle. And so that may require additional sketches. And I'm going to show you guys how to use a tool called Split to take lines and other geometric objects to actually cut up your design, kind of like we would if we're making a puzzle. You have lines, you want to cut this into individual pieces. There's some tools that'll make that relatively easy. So I am going to create a new sketch using the Create Sketch button. Click the top of my wolf here. And I'm going to think about sort of making maybe a grid or some type of rough outlines to show how I'm going to chop this piece up into different puzzle pieces. So let me, we could keep it pretty simple. We'll make it into 4 pieces. So I'm going to add a horizontal line. Let me add a vertical line. I may want to do additional pieces if you want a more intricate design. Now, if I just hit Finish Sketch, I could cut this up into 4 pieces pretty easily. Just a heads up, I'm going to go back and make this a little more interesting here in a second. There's a tool called Split Body. That is a useful tool for taking a solid object that you've designed and cutting it up using things like lines and curves. You can take the body that you want to split up. And if I look in over here in my browser menu, look at the bodies list, you can see that there's just one body that I've extruded so far. But if I click where it says splitting tools and use these little lines as something extra clicked. I'll just grab one of these guys. I'll probably have to do these in separate operations. All right, let me use just one of those lines for right now. Click OK. You can see what it's done. It's taken that single body and it's split that into two pieces. So I've got here in my browser menu, two separate bodies. Now, in terms of making a puzzle with interlocking pieces that fit together, this is not particularly interesting. So I'm going to Control Z back up. Here in my timeline, I'm going to double click that sketch I used to make these lines. I'm going to try and make some pieces that look a little more like a puzzle. So to do that, I'm going to use the circle tool to make some circles that are going to represent the pieces of the puzzle that are going to interlock and connect together. Now, this may look a little weird at first, but once I clean these lines up a little bit, I think you'll probably see how this turns into a puzzle. So I've got a couple circles drawn here. What I want are essentially interlocking pieces between the separate bodies in my design. So I'm going to grab this trim tool and trim up some of these pieces of the circle. So what I've got are parts of the circle that represent the interlocking portions between the different pieces of my puzzle. So easiest way to do that is to cut out the lines that you drew to create the grid for the puzzle, and typically the short arc of the circle that you drew between the adjacent pieces. So something kind of like that. You can kind of see, hopefully, how this is starting to look like more like a traditional puzzle. Well, let me click Finish Sketch. Let me go back and use this Split Body tool. Again, that's from the Modify menu, and that lets you take a 3D body. I'm going to select one of these lines, and we're going to use that as a tool to cut that body into separate pieces. So click OK with that first line. Let me do that one more time with my horizontal puzzle pieces. So I'm going to cut both of these bodies, so I'm going to make sure to select both of those. And then where it says Splitting Tool, I'm going to grab this other horizontal weird little line with those little bulges that are going to essentially make these separate pieces of the puzzle. So now this looks more like your traditional puzzle, and it's in the shape of Mr. Willie the Wolf's head. And now all these pieces are saved as bodies, and that is perfectly fine for this type of project. Those are the 3D bodies. Those are things we could right-click. We can generate mesh files that we can send to our 3D printer slicer program, and we can print those pieces easy peasy. But those bodies are tied to my top-level components, this document, this design file that I've created. If you want to disassemble your design, what you'll need to do is select all of these bodies. If you right-click them, there's an option to turn those into components. Let me do that real quick. You'll see those bodies have disappeared, but you now have these different components. If you remember what we mentioned last week, is these components are parts of a design. They're containers for parts of a design. If you've got a complicated design that's got lots of individual parts, you may have lots of different components. But if you look at these components, now each of these components has its own body. So each of these bodies is saved to a component. But the nice thing about components is that they have their own coordinate system, which means you can click and oh, that one's anchored. Let me hide my sketch. There we go. You can click and drag and move that around and see what those individual pieces look like. And now this is starting to look a little more like a puzzle. And if I were just given these 4 pieces and I didn't know how they fit together, I didn't know what they look like, that might actually be a puzzle that might be interesting to put together. It might be, this one's not too challenging. It's just 4 pieces. But if you check out some of those 3D model repositories like Thingiverse and Yegi and Printables and Things, you'll see some more intricate designs that might be a little more complicated to create a CAD model for. But for our purposes, if you're making a puzzle, you can kind of follow these steps to make your own thing. It doesn't have to be this. In fact, I kind of hope you guys come up with something a little more interesting, a little more challenging. But again, you can follow those basic steps to take a existing picture or image, create that into a 3D model, chop it up into a puzzle that should fit together. So let me go ahead and save that. So that is my basic tutorial for making a simple 3D printable puzzle. I will give you guys just a quick heads up before I quit talking. There are some features here, now that I have this broken up into individual pieces, that might actually end up being hard to print. There's some really thin parts. This is one of the reasons we'd want to go in and look at this as separate pieces, because we might want to go in and adjust like the sketches and how we extruded some of these pieces in order to get rid of those small, thin, what are probably going to be pretty breakable parts of this design. So I may need to tweak this before it's ready to 3D print. But like I said, that's kind of the basic steps to get you started. So give it a shot. If you want to do a 3D puzzle type thing, if you want to do one of the other options, that's perfectly fine. We'll look at some demos for those other options tomorrow. All right.